Okay, hello, 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 coaches and leaders. Dr. Chris Jones is on with me again, and we're going to do something unusual. And we're going to kind of co-host
Is it
this.
unusual for
This
two people
is
to get on a Zoom call and just talk to each other about random things?
it
Like,
is
is that
not
unusual?
unusual to do that, but for this podcast, it is because you are not my guest. You are my co-host today, and we're gonna like have a conversation that is totally unplanned. I have a thing I want to talk to Chris about, and he doesn't even know what it is. And what the reason why I wanted to do this with you, Chris, is I don't think I even like really told you this. Like I've just been thinking about it. And that is I want to disrupt. I want this to be like a disruptive uh
Well, I'm
like
not the right person for this
conversation.
then. Like, I am not disruptive at
you're
all. Like,
you're a go with the flow, follow
that's
all the
not
rules
me.
kind of
Like, I'm a
guy. I
yes
know
man,
you.
check the box. Like, oh, you want me to do that? I will gladly do that for you. I am not a disruptor.
I I want to disrupt the idea that there's one right way to do things.
Hmm.
And what I appreciate when you and I have conversations about our thoughts, about education, our experiences, what research we have read, we disagree sometimes. And equally we have like different experiences and read different research. And I appreciate that, really holding that there's no one right way to do things, right? And I want to bring that into this podcast. Like I want folks to hear us like discussing and like sometimes disagreeing and arguing about different points because it's great, right? Because we and sometimes I change the way I think about things, right? Sometimes you change the way you think about things, right? So I
Yeah.
lately I've been taking on the phrase my current thinking is because I'm like, you know what? At any moment I could change, right? So that is I wanted to just share that with you and everyone
Yeah.
listening.
Well,
That that is
I like the idea of my current thinking because it acknowledges a whole lot of things other than the fact that this is what I'm thinking about right now. This is how I'm thinking right now, but it reflects the fact that maybe this is not how I thought I used to think, but now I think. But it recognizes the flexible thinking. It recognizes this growth mindset. It
yeah.
recognizes that I'm not fixed, rigid, and like stuck in my ways. Like you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Like all of those things that we can sometimes, I won't say fall victim to, but as leaders, as coaches, as people who live to have an impact and influence on others, there is no better way to model what it is that we expect than to say
Yeah.
something like what I'm currently thinking is, or my
Is.
current
Yeah.
thinking leads me, because it is very frustrating to try to move someone off their spot who refuses
Yeah.
to consider,
Yeah.
even consider other
hmm
possibilities.
Exactly. That's
So I
exactly it, right?
appreciate
So
that.
we have to do it ourselves. Yeah. So this is what I want to talk to you about. I want to discuss with you because I was talking with a group of a whole district actually of coaches and leaders, like all of the coaches and leaders in the district, about how growth mindset and fixed mindset, that concept isn't good or bad, that
Mm.
there's like it's not on a continuum because what I was like the thing I was sharing. So on top of the growth, all the growth mindset work I've done, and I know I've shared with you, I've worked with the researchers that coined it, is that it's neutral. And what we've done in education, we have like, and you're enlightened if you operate under a growth mindset, and it demonizes fixed mindset, but everyone operates under fixed mindsets. And so what I assert is it's not good or bad. None of it's good. It's not good to operate under a growth mindset, and it's not good to operate under a fixed mindset, right? Because I said, look, it's not, you're not good if you operate under a growth mindset. And they said, well, is it good for a fixed mindset? And I was like, no, it's not in that continuum.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
I wanted to hear your thoughts. My assertion is it's not good or bad.
Oh my God, you really did prep me for this. So I don't know if I've thought about evaluating whether or not something is good or bad when it comes to um the in the direct concept of fixed mindset and growth mindset. I think I think effective is a word that might better place, because when I think of good and bad, I think of like good as in healthy, wholesome, full of value, et cetera. And then bad would be like detrimental, like this can
Hmm.
harm you.
Hmm.
I don't know in the sense of your question, I don't know that a fixed mindset is harmful in any way to send you
Hmm.
backwards. It maybe can get
Hmm.
you stuck. And
Hmm.
so, one
Exactly.
thing I've always said is if you're not moving forward, you're either moving backwards or you're standing still. But standing still or moving backwards are two things that aren't allowing you to move forward. And so I don't know. I mean, that's a great question of, good or bad. I think there are instances where, like in specific contexts, one is bad and one is good. But I like effectiveness better. I don't
Yes.
know.
Okay.
What's your,
Go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry, I
I was
interrupted
just going
you.
to say, tell me more about
Yeah.
what your thinking is around this idea of there is no good and bad when it comes to our mindsets.
So, first of all, I think one of the huge issues we have in education is that we have little growth mindset blinders on. Like, here we are walking around little blinders. It is super limited to focus just on growth mindset when research now shows, but has not been popularized by some famous book, that to get unstuck, and I love that you use the word stuck, we need actually four mindsets. Growth mindset is one of them. We need four mindsets, not just one. So, growth mindset is one of them. Another one is self-efficacy. I believe here, I'll share them as statements, right? So, I believe I can improve is growth mindset. I believe I can succeed, self-efficacy. I believe I belong in this community. And I believe this has value for me. It's meaningful. We need all four of those to
Yeah.
get unstuck, right? And I just I use knitting as an example. Like, it doesn't matter if I believe I can get better at knitting. I do. I believe I can get better at knitting. If I work hard, try different strategies, ask for help, I do. I'm not going to do it because it doesn't have value for me.
Right.
Just go buy the
Hmm.
the scarf.
Well, and I think it's interesting that the four mindsets that they all start with I believe and not I do,
I
or I
okay.
can, or I am able. Like, for example, I believe that I could become a medical doctor. Like, I believe I could become right now. I'm 47 years old. I'm
Hmm.
17, 18 years into my current career. I believe that if I wanted to, I could go to a school to start working to become either a neuroscience scientist or a brain surgeon, which is what I wanted to become when I was a child. Like, I was obsessed with the brain. I'm still obsessed with the brain, but I believe I can do it. I, but I'm not going to, right?
Right. Right,
Right.
right, right.
And I don't know if that's because I don't have the resources to go back to school, which is probably the answer. I'm a
Mm,
father of four children and the
uh-huh.
responsible person for making sure that we have a roof over our head, clothes on our backs, and food in our bellies. But like, that's a completely different conversation. Do you have the resources, even
Hmm.
even if you've got the belief, even if you've got the belief that you
Hmm.
can, the belief that you will succeed, I forget the third one, I forget it now.
I
I believe
belong in this
the
community.
inclusivity, and
Hmm.
then the last one was
Value.
I believe
This has value.
that this has value for me. So I believe I have all four mindsets around
Hmm.
becoming a
Hmm.
neuroscientist, but there's a layer of action and
Hmm.
enabling and capacity
Right, right.
to be able to carry off, to translate. And this is where I live. I live in the translating the belief and the vision into actionable steps, reality, strategy, goals, objectives that are measurable, feedback loop,
Hmm.
et cetera, et cetera. Like, I live in the get your hands dirty.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know if I live there before I live in belief, or if I live in belief simultaneously with the action.
Here's the thing about belief. We all have beliefs no matter what. Like, you have beliefs right now about yourself, about your abilities, about your ability to achieve things, right? So if you here's my question for you. Like, do you no, I really want to know. would you actually like to be a neuroscientist?
No, no, I am super satiated with who I am, what I do, how I walk in my purpose. Being a neuroscientist, I don't think fulfills my purpose.
Okay.
And so
You said the thing. You said the thing though. Sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
go ahead, let's
Okay,
hear
okay,
it.
okay. Well, you said so you are not going to become a neuroscientist, not necessarily because you don't have the resources, but because it doesn't provide value for you. That's one of the beliefs.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, if I were looking, um, yeah. I mean, monetarily speaking, it probably would.
Hmm.
Maybe neuroscience would be a path to a greater level of influence somehow.
Hmm.
Um, you know, melding the world of neuroscience with what I do as a learning, teaching, leading facilitator.
Hmm.
Um, it possibly could, but I'm satiated. You know what I mean? Like I'm
Yeah.
satisfied. I
Yeah,
am
right.
I am happy.
Yeah. So this is my point.
I don't have a need to change.
Right. So just because you believe, and we're going back to growth mindset here, just because you believe you can change doesn't mean you will, because it doesn't, one of the mindsets, having value and purpose for you, it doesn't, right? And so when we think about, I'm going to bring us back to good and bad, by the way, but when we think about like children that are stuck in the classroom or teachers that are stuck making progress, and we're like, they just need to believe they can do it.
It's not enough.
No, it's not
Yeah,
enough.
yeah, yeah.
And I think you just exemplified that, right? So then my question is like, inherently, is always operating under a growth mindset, which by the way, none of us do. None of us operate under a growth mindset in our entire life, throughout our entire lives. There's areas where we operate under fixed mindsets and we don't even know that we do, right? But is it good? Is it good or bad? Like moral. That's how I consider that morality,
Yeah,
right? Should we
I think of
bring
good and bad in morality too.
Yeah, should we have morality with fixed and growth mindset?
Mm. No, I think they just are. I think
Hmm.
sometimes it's recognizing, okay, I'm going at this with a very fixed mindset. I need to open my mind. I need to think about my current thinking, or
Yes.
I used to think versus what I currently think, and whether it's good or bad. But I am making a connection to Marzano's work actually
Mm.
in um and it has nothing to do with mindset. It has to do with student engagement. So Marzano, the highly engaged classroom.
For those of you listening and not
I
watching this,
gave
Chris is literally looking at his bookshelf right
I gave my copy away, but
now.
so Marzano tells us that engagement has two categories for students, and they're structured around four questions. Two questions are in the first category, and then once you can affirmatively answer those two questions or account for those two questions, then students are ready to move to the second set of questions. And the first one is around attention. Like you have to have students' attention before you can engage them. So they have to know that the learning and the thinking, they have to pay attention to that thing.
Yeah.
So the first question in the gatekeeping bucket, well, I call it the gatekeeping bucket. I forget what he called it, but is how do I feel? So if a student is thinking about something other than and it, like cannot get their mind off of that thing because it's directly attached to an emotion, like all the blood's in the amygdala, like not
Hmm.
going to happen.
Hmm.
So that's the first question. So if you can account for how a student feels and recognize that. So I mean, for example, if I'm worried about this roof falling over my head, you and I are never going to have a meaningful conversation to record a podcast because I'm worried about the roof falling over my head. So how do I feel is the first one. And then the second one is, am I interested? So like that's the two questions to that are rolling around in students' heads when they're thinking about what to attend to. So the things that they can control, obviously the brain is always searching with the five senses for threats. I mean, that's what the brain's doing. But when the student has those two questions and their answer, I feel okay and ready to learn, and I'm interested in what I'm learning. Then it moves into the second two questions for engagement is the first one is, does this matter? It's the relevance question, and
Mm-hmm.
it's your value. I
Mm-hmm.
believe this has
Yep.
value.
Yeah.
It's the value question, and I forget what the exact question is now. If you give me 1 second, it'll come to mind. Um, is this important? Yes, boom.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do I feel? Am I interested? And then it moves into, is this important? And then the last one is, can I do this? That's the efficacy piece. So, it is very much aligned what you're talking about in terms of what Marzano believes and has found through his research, that those four questions for students on their minds are almost matched up with these four mindsets that you're talking about.
You're making my point. This is making me so happy right now. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, good. I, and I like really, I don't know what I want to say about that in
So let me
response.
ask you this: why is it important if something is good or bad to you? Like, why did that even pop in
Because,
your head?
because I think
Blinders is because the
I
blinders.
think the blinders, I think there's so many things. I think in general we collapse morality with too many things that are not moral. First of all, that's another conversation for another day. But I just like it really irritates me when I go into schools and I'm like, there's this perfect, beautiful bulletin board with growth mindset and GROWTH is an acronym for something, right? That stands for growth mindset. And then I like walk through classrooms and all I hear is like fixed mindset language and behaviors. And then if by some chance someone is attempting to teach growth mindset, even well, we're still missing the mark. Like I just feel like I don't often see in schools like we even if we are like we're not doing growth mindset well most of the time. This is my experience, not the truth. And if we are even attempting to shift people's beliefs, which by the way, oh, like you said, believe, right? Beliefs are mindsets. That's what mindsets are. And what's a mindset? I actually asked a group. Oh, I asked this beautiful group this yesterday. This group of, I thought this was so interesting. You might find this interesting too. I was working with this group of school leaders. It's like over 100 of them. And I said, where do beliefs live? I've never asked a group this. I was like, physically, where does a belief live? And they said, in your heart. And I was like, what? I did not expect them to, and they all agree. I was like, you all agree? And I was like, well, well, this is my thinking is it actually lives in our head as neurons, right? So it's neurons connecting what wires together, fires together, right? Neurons are actually like electricity going bzz, right? That's my belief. And if we want to share beliefs, we need to connect different neurons together, right? And how we think impacts how we feel, our heart. But I just thought that was so interesting.
Yeah,
Where does a mindset live?
yeah.
And like
I,
beyond that,
I,
even, okay, tell
I
me.
would say a mindset and beliefs don't even live in your head and your heart. They live in your actions.
They originate somewhere though.
I'll give you the beliefs are developed over time based on either your experiences, which are tied to your actions, or your teachings. Whether you were indoctrinated or taught to think and believe a
Yeah.
certain thing, that's one side of it. But over experiences, you develop beliefs because your brain as a pattern recognition machine has
Mhm.
recognized some patterns and then formulated, okay, this is where it is. But ultimately, if we sat down over the course of a year and every day we wrote down a different belief that we
Mhm.
truly held in our heart, in our head, wherever, for 365 days, those beliefs show up in our actions. You can you
Yes.
you can see a person's beliefs without ever asking them what your beliefs are, based on how they carry themselves, how they speak, how they talk, how they value
Yeah.
relationships, how they value, you know, whatever, whatever. you can
This is an
see
interesting assertion.
what they
I
believe. Like I
okay.
believe, for example, just this we're recording this podcast, and we know that we're going to promote this in a way that puts an organization out front. As the executive director of an organization, we're going to put this podcast on the organization's thing. So right before we started recording, you asked, hey, we haven't agreed whether or not we're going to cuss. And I believe that in
Yep.
representing a professional organization, I'm wearing a button up and not like a t-shirt or a hoodie.
Mm-hmm.
So, boom, I'm representing my organization. And because I'm representing my organization, we probably should not say bad words because I'm representing something larger than myself. So, my beliefs show up. And you didn't even have to ask me. In
Mm-hmm.
recording this, I wouldn't have said any cuss words, and I'm wearing
Mm-hmm.
a button up. So you can tell, all
Mm-hmm.
right, he's wearing his button up, and Chris isn't cussing like he sometimes does.
Mm-hmm.
So, he must value his role in representing the organization that he represents.
Mm-hmm. You
So
just said a
you can
thing.
see my belief. It's not living in my head or my heart, it's living in my actions.
Yes. I still think, though, that they're separate things. I think, the phrase like you walk your talk.
Yeah, that's right. That's it right there. Boom, boom, boom.
Okay. You can, so I agree with you that our actions are influenced by either the beliefs we say we have or the beliefs that are hidden from us, right? I call that a hidden commitment,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So we might say, I mean, a really kind of simplistic example of this is like I say, this is about commitments. Hold on, I'm distinguishing commitments from beliefs here. But it's still like I can say I have a belief. Oh, let me think of that. I say I have a belief, and my actions can be different, but those actions actually are playing out the actual belief, not what I say I had,
Right.
but the
Yes.
belief
And
underneath it.
that's why it
Mm.
doesn't live in your head. It lives in your actions. Because you like
Oh, I gotta think about that.
there's a saying, and I'm gonna butcher it up. This saying is something like don't tell me, show me, and I'll believe you, or something like that. I totally butchered up that quote, but it's like I'll believe you. Don't tell me, or do show me, and I'll believe you. Like actions
Yeah.
speak louder than words, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. But it is very clear who you are, what you believe, what you value, and in your actions and how you carry, how you value, like all of those things. Now, where it can get problematic, and I just want to say this, is if we care or assign value to somebody's actions in judgment of their beliefs. Like I think that's where we get into trouble.
Hmm.
That's me.
Say more about that.
So let's say that I got on here. Let's go back to that. And I had my t-shirt on and I'm cussing up the storm. It's
Hmm.
easy for either you or anybody who's tuning in to listen to this thing to make judgments about my beliefs regarding how I show up in the world and the words I choose to use in a context where we're talking about fixed and growth mindset, and here I am throwing around cuss words. You know what I mean? Like I think we as individuals get into trouble when we're assigning values to somebody else's beliefs based on how their beliefs are showing up in their actions.
I agree. And I think that judgment keeps us from being highly effective.
So
And
then why are we
oh, this is
assigning good and bad to growth mindset, Becca?
where are we?
No, why are we assigning good and bad to
Oh,
growth mindset?
yeah, I think it's just
I what I hear you say, and please, what I hear you say is that growth mindset is neither good nor bad.
mhm.
Growth mindset by itself, if done well, is still not enough.
Right. There's the two buckets. I'm returning back to the two buckets. One is like you just said, there's the four mindsets, right? And that growth mindset isn't enough. And then that's all my assertion. And then my other assertion is um that my other assertion is that it's not good or bad because like there are some areas in my life that are not impacted because I operate under a fixed mindset. Maybe it's like, what do I operate? I have to think. The
Right.
coaching.
It just is, right? It doesn't set you back, but it just doesn't move
No,
you forward.
no, it
It
would,
just is.
because it doesn't matter. It's like, I probably operate under, I don't, it's hard because I do have a very strong growth mindset in most areas. So I'm trying to think of, it doesn't, well, I'll just say this. I operate under a growth mindset with athletics, but it doesn't matter. So, and what I mean by that is I believe that if I practiced and I got some good coaching around any sport, let's say volleyball. I've played volleyball all of 3 times in my life, all of which in college, because they were like one man short for what are those games called? Recreational game, right? And they're like, Becca, come and play. And I'm like, I've never played volleyball. What do you do? Right. So I've probably played 3 times in my life. I believe that if I got good coaching, I could get better. But that doesn't impact my life. I'm not playing volleyball. I don't have any interest in playing volleyball. So whether I had a fixed or growth mindset around that, it doesn't it
Hmm.
doesn't matter. I'm not playing volleyball. I don't have any intention of it. And I want to say something around my language too. I'm saying this or that, and mindsets aren't black or white. They're like on a continuum. We can have fixed, anywhere mixed. We can have mixed mindsets and we can have growth mindsets. So it's really on more of a continuum. And I know you love continuums. And so it's really continuum. So I just want to like acknowledge I'm saying this or that, but it's really on a continuum. What are your thoughts about that?
No, I think they just are.
Yep.
But, when you ask are they good or bad, and I don't even remember what your original question was, but it
Yeah,
was
that's what it
around
was. That's what it was. Yeah.
assigning value
Yeah.
to growth. I like the idea of there are multiple mindsets that we need to um, bring to mind, make
Hmm.
aware. I don't know if, and I don't know, I might be sticking my foot in my mouth here, but I don't know if we need to teach them.
Oh, say more about that.
I don't know. Like,
If we
I
need
mean,
to teach
so
mindsets.
let me just say this. There is no like in Virginia, we have standards of learning. Like the standards of learning are what guide what we
Mhm.
teach. And so there is no standard of learning for growth mindset.
Of course.
It
Yeah.
doesn't show up in the curriculum growth mindset.
Yeah.
So as an intended outcome, it doesn't exist.
Hmm.
So I'm not building instruction around content that doesn't exist. I'm not building an assessment to measure whether or not the student has a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. Like there's a whole big
Hmm.
mess around that. That
Hmm.
includes a lot more than just growth mindset. I mean, that could be things around like resilience and empathy and communication and critical like there,
Hmm.
I don't want
Right.
to I don't want to open Pandora's box, but
Hmm.
if we value in education this idea of growth mindset, or if we throw in these four that recent research has shown us, then we need to have a standard. We need to create instruction to reach the standard, and then we need to have some kind of tool to measure whether or not we've reached the standard. Because how much time existed for human beings before we even were aware of this idea of growth versus fixed?
Right. A
I don't know,
bajillion. That's
thousands of years, maybe like a
yeah.
thousand years, maybe, I don't know.
I use my
So
official bajillion number. I just want that everyone to
knowing
know.
knowing as a human being, knowing whether or not I'm in the middle of a moment in my life, knowing whether or not I'm in that moment with a fixed mindset, like I'm a great driver, I don't need to change how I'm driving, everybody else sucks, or
Mhm.
growth mindset, wow, I really could become a better defensive driver and back into blah blah blah. So knowing whether or not I have a growth or fixed mindset in a given scenario or situation or moment of my life, I don't know if it matters. And if it does, then great. But if it doesn't, then why teach it?
Okay.
Why do we need it to be an outcome for our children to develop the skill to identify when they're saying I can versus I can't yet? Or,
Hmm. So this is my thinking around it, right? We also don't have a standard for children around differentiation because it's actually a teacher's job to differentiate, right? So
Differentiation is an instruction, not an outcome.
right. Right. And I get that. I'm like a little apples to oranges here. But my point is, I'm actually wondering if these mindsets, especially outside of self-efficacy and growth mindset, right? Which someone could understand, like a child can understand for themselves. And like I belong in this community and this has value for me. I think it's a teacher's job and those folks listening, right? My coaches and leaders, I think it's a coach and leader's job to help bring belonging, a sense of belonging and value for the people who are in charge of helping to grow, right? Adults or children. And so, no, there's not a standard for that because it's not those people were in charge of growing and supporting. It's not their job to internally create the sense of belonging. It's the people whose job it is to help lead and grow. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, so and I don't know if we're talking about two different things or if we're talking about the same thing. Like it's a leader's responsibility to create an environment of belonging, right? It's important to create the conditions for a student to want to come to school because they feel like they belong, as opposed to I don't want to go to school because I don't have a place here. It's not inclusive. I don't see myself in any, like, none of those things. So the leader, the coach, the teacher does have the responsibility, like, and that's just one of the mindsets, right? That's just the I believe I belong.
Yeah.
Um, so so teaching that as a mindset for somebody to have, I'm
Mhm.
questioning whether or not we need to do that, or if we just create the conditions for it to happen, it just happens. This goes back to the conversation
Mhm.
of belief versus do. This,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
I think there's a bit of a difference in, I don't know if we need to teach students how to feel like they belong, or
Mhm.
if it's our job to create the conditions for them to belong
Yeah.
and feel like they belong and
Yeah.
believe like they belong. And so when they have that feeling, maybe making the connection, do you feel like you're loved here? Do you feel like you're
Mhm.
cared for? Do you feel like there are opportunities that are designed specifically for you? Yes, and yes, and yes. Okay, then you belong here. Or telling them specifically, you belong. And then over time, maybe they develop that belief, but teaching how
Mhm.
to believe you belong, or how
No,
to believe
no,
you can do it,
no.
or I don't know if we
Mm-mm.
need to make that part of our curriculum.
No,
So
no, I don't think
it's
we
like a
do.
very sticky part of the conversation, because there are a lot of things that schools teach children that they're not responsible for teaching, that do
Hmm.
not show up in the standards, that we're not accountable for, that are not on the end of course high stakes standardized test. But we do it anyways because it's how we help develop really strong human beings and allow students to reach their full potential and go after their desires.
So this is actually how I use the four academic mindsets. I use it as a diagnostic tool, and I teach my folks when they're in my academy to do the same. So I teach those four mindsets, and the context is really about working with teachers. So it's the context is I'm teaching coaches and leaders to look at their teachers. And I'm very clear because we spend so much time thinking about growth mindset with students or mindsets in general with students that the first thing we always, and I know you and I agree on this, coaches and leaders, we have to do the work first,
That's
right?
right.
So I actually teach it as a diagnostic tool. So if there's a teacher that is stuck, I teach my coaches and leaders to ask themselves what they think needs support of those four mindsets. Does the teacher not believe they can improve? Does the teacher not believe they can succeed? Does the teacher not believe they belong, not feel like they belong? And does the teacher not believe this has value? And I would say the most common
Is the last one.
is the last one. Oh, you took it from me. You took my moment.
What
Yeah,
are we doing? What are
yeah,
we doing? Yeah,
yeah.
no.
Right. And that's I think the big mistake with just hammering home growth mindset. Like
So
you just need to believe you can
So let me
improve.
ask you this. So we talk about tiering our coaching and our approaches based on the individual, because we want to meet them where they are. Their year's worth of growth is going to look different from another teacher's year's worth of growth. And so if a coach or a leader understands an individual person's strengths and needs for a little attention with the four mindsets, do you change your coaching approach based on that?
Absolutely.
So what is,
If it,
give me an example of what that looks
okay.
like.
Okay.
So let's say that, for
Oh, let me
example, I'm
think.
working with a teacher. As a coach, I'm working with a teacher who does not believe that improving, not doesn't believe that improving instruction has value.
I would ask, in what way does the the
I don't know.
teacher
I've
not
been doing this
believe?
for years. I get good test
Yeah.
results. I'm going to do what I do. I don't need to change up. I don't see a need to make any changes.
Hmm. So, and specifically, the value is around improvement, right? Like, I don't believe it doesn't have value for me to improve as a teacher.
Right.
There's so much nuance around this. Okay. Now okay. All right.
So and we don't have, I mean, we've already been recording for quite some time. So I don't know
Yeah.
how long you want to make these episodes or if you want to do
Yeah.
like part one, part two.
Yeah.
But I do think that ultimately, like the people tuning in, it's great to talk about whether something's good or bad and whether we should teach it or not or how it shows up. But ultimately, like I'd love if I'm listening in as a coach to be like, all right, I get your four mindsets. And let's say that
Hmm.
I've got a teacher I'm working with because coaches don't want help with teachers who are all in for the coaching cycle, right? Coaches want help with the teachers who are resistant
Stuck.
to change. But so
Yep.
if I'm thinking about, it's the value question that I run into a lot, and
Yep.
and you
Yep. Me
just
too.
in having this conversation, I'm reflecting on how I coach and how I approach coaching
Hmm.
based on how a teacher in an observation debrief in that reflective dialogue, I make my adjustments based on how the teacher is responding to my questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whether I'm unpacking
Yes.
whether I'm unpacking a mindset or not. Like
Yeah.
if a teacher is like what I just did to you, like digging my heels in, I don't need to change. I get good results. The kids are just fine.
Mhm.
I don't, I've been doing this for years. I've got more blah 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 whatever. Then like that is going to change and shift
Mhm.
how I approach that teacher and what my next questions are going to be.
Mhm. Exactly. Yeah, 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 for sure. That this is definitely another whole episode. But and me too. That's why I think that it's dangerous to just rely on protocols because protocols do not take into account when things don't go the way the protocol thinks it should go, right? And it just it goes right into the world of mutual purpose. Like why are we here, what's important to you and what's important to me, and finding a mutual purpose. Like how are we growing? There's lots of different ways classrooms can grow, right? It doesn't have to be one way, or in one direction, or this specific thing at this specific time. We can shift and we can focus on this other thing. And I like to say going through the side door. Like maybe there's a big thing that needs to improve in the classroom and the teacher doesn't think it does. Okay, let's shift our attention to something that would make an impact. And what's super powerful, I think we need to wrap up after this because time is coming to an end. But I think something that's super powerful that is often underutilized and underestimated is trust. If someone if someone is like if someone does not find value in something that maybe me as a coach, I'm like, we really need to change this. This is like hugely impacting your classroom, right? If I have strong trust with that teacher, sometimes I can lean in and be like, can we just try it? Can we just like try this thing? And that can overcome the lack of belief that it is important too. Right. Like, and then that we go right back to your action belief cycle, action belief, action belief. Like, hey, it's totally cool that you might not believe this has value. Can we just try it? Action, action,
Yeah.
action,
And
reflection. Oh, I've
change
shifted
the
my belief.
behavior
Yeah.
before you change the belief. And
Yep.
sometimes it's like belief before behavior, behavior
Yep.
before
Exactly.
belief. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Exactly. Chicken or the egg. Yeah, exactly. All right. We got to wrap this conversation. Any any final words from you
Yeah.
around this?
Yeah, I just think like when when we shifted the conversation from understanding the mindsets and whether or not we should be teaching them, but understanding how they show up in the teachers we coach and the people we lead, like understanding how each individual shows up and where they are, I think is extremely important for a coach, but also understanding that there are ways, and maybe we're not going to unpack that today, but there are definitely ways, sometimes through, sometimes around. I believe in the direct, like, let's go through this. Like, can we agree on a couple of things? And when we find common ground, then we can start to chip away at some of those beliefs,
Mm-hmm.
especially around value. Does coaching have value? I don't value this coaching cycle. I'd rather you leave me alone and not take my planning time. Like, you know what I mean? Like, all right, so how do we work through that by finding common ground through common purpose and a shared purpose? But then I also think that our skills as coaches allow us to make the case without having to make the case, because what we do as coaches allow that reflection to happen and allow those mindsets to start to break down if they are having that, I don't believe this has value, or I don't believe I can be successful. That's a
Mm-hmm.
completely different one than does it has value. But my point is there are three very specific skills that a coach has to master in order for any of that,
Yes.
to take place. And I know we're going to save the skills for another time.
Name the skills though. Folks want to know.
So the skills are, observation and collecting observation data. That's skill one. A
Hmm.
coach has to be a master at observing, teaching, and learning, and recording it and finding a way to catalog and collect that data. Skill number two is, now that you've collected the data and it's time to have that reflective dialogue with the teacher, skill number two is the reflective questioning techniques, your strategies for asking questions, your techniques for asking questions, your ability to really cause the teacher to not just reflect, but to examine their practice through the data that you collected. And then number three, after you've asked the question, you've got to be a skillful listener, because the teacher will really help, in you two becoming not adversarial, but in partners in examining, diagnosing, and prescribing, when it comes to improving instruction that will therefore lead to improved student learning outcomes for each and every student. Not 80%, not 95%, every single one of them babies.
Hmm. Love it. Okay. This is 100% going to be another episode, but all right, I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you so much. I was glad we touched on 100 topics on this, and listeners, get ready. We're going to do more of these episodes. All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah.